The history of the Persian Empire begins long before its peak under Cyrus the Great. Its roots are deeply connected with the Aryan tribes that inhabited the Iranian plateau for millennia. Among these tribes, the Persians stood out, who would later give their name to one of the largest and most influential empires of antiquity. The origin of the name Persia is linked to the province of Parsa, or Fars, a region located in the south of present-day Iran. It was there that the first Persians settled around the 2nd millennium BCE, in a mountainous and fertile area suitable for agriculture and livestock. This strategic location, near the Persian Gulf and surrounded by mountains, facilitated both defense and trade with other civilizations of the time. The first Persian rulers emerged as local tribal leaders who organized their communities in small towns and villages, living relatively isolated, but already with a well-defined social structure. Among the initial rulers of the Achaemenid dynasty, legendary figures such as Achaemenes, the supposed founder of the dynasty, stand out. Although there is little concrete historical evidence about Achaemenes, he is traditionally considered the patriarch of the Achaemenids, whose name was preserved for generations as a symbol of leadership and authority. Around the 7th century BC, the Achaemenid dynasty began to gain strength under the command of Cyaxares, one of the first historical kings of Persia. Cyaxares is credited with consolidating Persian power in the region of Parsa and expanding its borders. He established the capital in Anshan, an important city located near Susa, in the heart of the Elamite Empire. This city would become one of the first centers of Persian power, showing the connection between the early civilizations of the region and the future Persian rulers. After Cyaxares' death, the kingdom was divided between his sons, Cyrus I and Ariaramnes. Cyrus III, ruling the wealthier and central part of Parsa, continued to expand Persian power, maintaining good relations with the Medes, who at the time were the dominant force in the region. He managed to maintain a policy of balance between the Medes and Assyria, which ensured Persia's stability during his reign. It was with Cambyses I, son of Cyrus I, that the dynasty began to glimpse the future that was being drawn. Cambyses first married Mandane, daughter of the Median king Astyages, thus uniting the two main royal houses in the region. From this union was born Cyrus II, later known as Cyrus the Great, the ruler who would transform the small Persian tribes into one of the largest empires in history. The rise of Cyrus the Great in 559 BC marked the beginning of a new era for the Iranian plateau. When Cyrus ascended to the throne, Persia was still a vassal of the Median Empire, which dominated much of the region. However, Cyrus soon distinguished himself by his military skill and political vision. In 550 BC, Cyrus led a revolt against his grandfather, Astyages, challenging the power of the Median Empire. In the decisive battle, Cyrus's forces defeated the Medes, capturing their capital, Ecbatana, modern Hamadan, Iran. This event not only marked the fall of the Median Empire, but also the unification of the Persian and Median tribes under Cyrus's command, laying the foundation for the future Achaemenid Empire. From then on, Cyrus established himself as one of the most powerful rulers in the region, asserting his authority over the scattered tribes and beginning a series of military campaigns to expand his borders. After consolidating his control over Media and other neighboring territories, Cyrus turned his attention to the powerful Babylonian Empire, which at the time ruled much of the Middle East. Under the reign of Nabonidus, Babylon had become politically unstable. Nabonidus, who distanced himself from local priests and disregarded important religious traditions, alienated much of the Babylonian population. This internal discontent paved the way for Cyrus to be seen as a liberator rather than just a conqueror. In 539 BC, Cyrus launched his military campaign against Babylon. The decisive battle took place at Opis, a city along the Tigris River, north of Babylon. The Babylonian troops were defeated by the Persian army, led by General Gobryas, a Babylonian officer who had defected to Cyrus's side. After this victory, the road to Babylon was open, and on October 12, 539 BC, the Persian forces entered the city with virtually no resistance. Cyrus made a triumphant entrance and was widely hailed by the Babylonians as their liberator. The fall of Babylon was a pivotal moment in the history of the Middle East. Although conquests were often brutal, Cyrus took a different approach. Instead of imposing his will by force, he presented himself as a restorer of order and justice. In the famous Cyrus Cylinder, an archaeological artifact that documents his achievements, Cyrus claims to have been chosen by the gods to restore peace in Babylon. He ordered the reconstruction of temples that had been neglected under Nabonidus and returned sacred idols to their rightful places. Furthermore, Cyrus respected local traditions and religions, avoiding interference in Babylonian religious practices. This attitude marked a significant departure from the typical governance methods of previous conquerors. By respecting the cultures and traditions of the peoples he subdued, Cyrus was able to maintain peace and strengthen his authority over the vast territory he had conquered. Babylon, which had been a center of power and culture for centuries, now became part of the growing Persian Empire. But its cultural identity was preserved, thanks to Cyrus's policies. One of the most notable examples of Cyrus's policy was his relationship with the Jewish people. During the Babylonian exile, thousands of Jews were deported from Jerusalem after the destruction of the First Temple in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar II. When Cyrus took control of Babylon, he immediately decreed the return of the Jews to their homeland, allowing them to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This event, known as the Edict of Cyrus, is recorded in the Bible and is considered a crucial moment in Jewish history. Cyrus ordered the return of the temple treasures that had been looted, and even provided funds for the reconstruction of the Second Temple, which would become the spiritual center of Judaism for centuries. The return of the Jews to Jerusalem under Cyrus marked the end of the Babylonian exile and the beginning of a new era for the Jewish people. Cyrus was seen as a divinely chosen liberator by the Jews, and his actions had a lasting impact on the religious history of the Middle East. He is one of the few non-Jewish figures mentioned with great reverence in the scriptures, being praised for his role in restoring the people of Israel. After the death of Cyrus the Great in 530 BC, the throne of the newly formed Persian Empire was passed to his son, Cambyses II. Cambyses II inherited not only a vast empire but also a tradition of military and administrative expansion. His reign was marked by one of the greatest conquests of antiquity, the subjugation of Egypt, one of the oldest and wealthiest civilizations in the world. At that time, Egypt was ruled by the 26th dynasty, whose last pharaoh was Psamtik III. Although Egypt had experienced periods of greatness in the past, by the time Cambyses II ascended the Persian throne, the Egyptian kingdom was facing political and military instability. This weakened situation caught the attention of Cambyses, who saw Egypt as the key to consolidating Persian control over the Near East and establishing a new strategic route along the Nile River and the eastern Mediterranean. In 525 BC, Cambyses launched his military campaign to conquer Egypt, crossing the Sinai Desert with a large army. He prepared well for the invasion by forming alliances with the rulers of territories neighboring Egypt, such as the Arabs of Sinai, who provided supplies and guides for his troops, facilitating the crossing. This move was strategic, as the desert served as a natural barrier for many invading armies, and Cambyses knew he had to overcome this obstacle before directly confronting the Egyptian army. The decisive battle took place near the city of Pelusium, located in the Nile Delta. The Persian army faced the forces of Psamtik III in an intense battle. According to some historical accounts, the Persians used an unusual psychological tactic during the confrontation. Knowing that the Egyptians revered animals like cats and other felines as sacred, Cambyses ordered his soldiers to paint images of cats on their shields and bring these animals to the battlefield. This strategy allegedly undermined the morale of the Egyptian troops, who hesitated to attack the Persians for fear of offending their gods. Although this story is surrounded by myths, the fact is that Cambyses emerged victorious. With the victory at Pelusium, Cambyses quickly advanced over Egypt, marching toward the capital, Memphis. Psamtik III, realizing that he did not have enough forces to resist, tried to reorganize but was captured by the Persians. Memphis fell without significant resistance, and with that, Cambyses consolidated his conquest of Egypt. He was formally crowned pharaoh, assuming total control of the country and marking the beginning of the 27th dynasty, also known as the Achaemenid dynasty in Egypt, which transformed the country into a satrapy of the Persian Empire. The conquest of Egypt was an important milestone for the Persian Empire. It not only signified domination over one of the oldest and richest civilizations in the world, but also allowed Cambyses to expand trade along the Nile and strengthen control over trade routes in the Mediterranean and Africa. Egypt, with its wealth and strategic position, brought great prestige and economic power to the empire. However, Persian rule over Egypt also faced challenges. Although Cambyses had been crowned pharaoh and attempted to integrate Egypt into his empire, he was unable to fully win over the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people. The traditional Egyptian resistance to foreign domination meant that the Persians were seen as foreign rulers, not as legitimate heirs to the pharaonic traditions. This resulted in several revolts over time, which would only be completely repressed by Cambyses' successors. Despite his impressive conquest of Egypt, Cambyses' reign was relatively short and troubled. After the subjugation of Egypt, he planned to further expand his borders to the south, attempting to conquer the kingdom of Kush, located in present-day Sudan, and advance westward into Libya. However, these campaigns were unsuccessful. The famous expedition against Kush, in particular, failed when much of his army disappeared in the desert due to a lack of supplies and adverse conditions. While Cambyses was in Egypt, news reached the king that a revolt had broken out in Persia, led by an impostor claiming to be his brother Bardia, also known as Smerdis. Cambyses quickly abandoned his expansion plans in Egypt and began the march back to Persia to deal with the crisis. However, during the return journey, Cambyses died under mysterious circumstances, possibly by accident or even suicide, leaving his empire in a state of uncertainty. After his death, the Persian throne was briefly occupied by the supposed impostor Bardia, until Darius the Great, one of the chief generals of the Persian army and a cousin of Cambyses, seized power and restored order to the empire. Egypt would remain an important part of the Persian Empire for over a century, until it was conquered by Alexander the Great in 332 BC, marking the end of the Achaemenid dynasty in the region. Nevertheless, Cambyses II's conquest remains one of the crucial moments in Persian expansion, demonstrating the ambition and military power that characterized the early centuries of the Persian Empire. Darius quickly consolidated his power and restored stability to the empire through successful military campaigns, crushing rebellions in Egypt, Babylon, and several other regions of the vast Persian territory. However, his true greatness did not lie solely in military strength, but in his administrative and organizational vision. Darius realized that to maintain such a vast and diverse empire, it would be necessary to create an efficient and innovative system of government. Thus, he introduced a series of reforms that transformed the Persian Empire into one of the most well-organized political structures of the ancient world. It all began with the creation of the satrapy system, a provincial government model that allowed the Persian Empire to efficiently control its vast lands. The empire was divided into approximately 20 satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap, who was the king's direct representative in the region. The satraps had the authority to govern locally, administer justice, and collect taxes, but they were carefully supervised by royal agents called the king's eyes and ears, who were responsible for reporting directly to Darius about any abuses of power or embezzlement of funds. This system allowed Darius to maintain centralized control while delegating enough authority for the satrapies to operate with some autonomy. In this way, the empire remained cohesive despite its cultural and geographical diversity. Furthermore, Darius implemented a rotation system for the satraps, ensuring that no governor accumulated enough power to rebel against the throne. The political structure of the satrapies was fundamental to the success of the Persian Empire, as it enabled efficient administration in regions as vast and distant as Asia Minor, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia itself. In addition, Darius standardized the currency throughout the empire, introducing the Darikar, a high-purity gold coin that facilitated trade and stabilized the economy. This standardization of currency allowed the different regions of the empire, which had previously used their own currencies and economic systems, to connect better, promoting prosperity and economic growth. As part of his administrative reforms and as a demonstration of his power and wealth, Darius initiated the construction of Persepolis, one of the most majestic and impressive cities of the ancient world. Persepolis, located in the province of Fars at the heart of the empire, was designed to be the ceremonial capital of the Persian kings, a place where subjects of the empire could pay homage to the emperor. The construction of Persepolis began around 518 BC and continued during the reign of Darius and his successors, such as Xerxes I. The city was a symbol of Persian power, with its enormous columns and terraces adorned with reliefs representing the various peoples of the empire bringing tributes to the king. Among the most notable buildings was the Apadana, the great audience hall where Darius received embassies and celebrated his victories. Persepolis was not only a political and administrative center, but also a religious and cultural site, reflecting the empire's splendor and diversity. To ensure fast and efficient communication across his vast empire, Darius also oversaw the construction of the Royal Road, a network of roads connecting the empire's main cities and facilitating the transportation of goods, troops, and information. The Royal Road stretched for about 2,700 kilometers, linking the Persian capital of Susa to the port of Ephesus in Asia Minor. Along the road, postal stations and horse exchange posts were built, allowing messengers to travel quickly from one point to another. This postal system was so advanced that, according to the Greek historian Herodotus, no man or creature travels the same distance faster than the Persian messengers. The roads not only unified the empire, but also facilitated trade, the exchange of information, and the movement of armies. The Royal Road was a vital artery for maintaining Darius's control over the empire. This communication network allowed him to keep direct oversight of his satrapies and ensured that royal orders reached the most distant regions of the empire quickly, securing the loyalty of local rulers and preventing revolts. The reign of Darius the Great was not limited to internal reorganization and consolidation of the Persian Empire. One of his greatest ambitions was to expand his dominion westward, particularly toward Greece. The regions of Asia Minor, where many Greek city-states were located, were already part of the empire, but mainland Greece remained a challenging frontier that Darius sought to subjugate, both to increase Persian prestige and to gain greater control over the Aegean Sea and its trade routes. Darius's desire to conquer Greece was spurred by the rebellion of the Greek cities in Ionia, a coastal region of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, that had been incorporated into the Persian Empire. These cities were culturally Greek, but had been under Persian rule since the expansion of Cyrus the Great. Starting in 499 BC, the Ionian cities, led by Miletus, revolted against Persian domination in an event known as the Ionian Revolt. The revolt was partially fueled by military aid from some Greek city-states, such as Athens and Eretria, which sent ships to support the Ionians. Although the revolt was crushed by Darius in 494 BC, with the destruction of Miletus, the involvement of Athens and Eretria enraged Darius, who considered it a direct affront to his power. It was at this point that Darius began planning a broader invasion of mainland Greece, not only to punish Athens and Eretria, but also to bring all the Greek city-states under Persian authority. Darius began his campaign to conquer Greece in 492 BC by sending a military expedition commanded by his general Mardonius, who successfully advanced through Thrace and Macedonia, subjugating these regions and incorporating them into the Persian Empire. However, the Persian fleet was severely damaged by a storm off the promontory of Mount Athos in northern Greece, forcing the expedition to retreat. This temporary setback did not diminish Darius's determination, and he planned a second invasion, this time with the aim of directly invading mainland Greece. In 490 BC, Darius organized a new expedition under the command of generals Datis and Artaphernes, who attacked the island of Euboea and the city of Eretria, one of the cities responsible for helping the Ionians. Eretria was captured and completely destroyed by the Persians as punishment for its involvement in the Ionian Revolt, and its inhabitants were enslaved. After the destruction of Eretria, the Persian army, composed of about 25,000 men, landed on the plain of Marathon, located about 40 kilometers northeast of Athens. Darius expected a swift and decisive victory, believing that the Athenian forces would be unable to resist the powerful Persian military machine. However, the Athenians, led by General Miltiades, managed to gather about 10,000 hoplites, heavy infantry soldiers, and, along with a small force of allies from Plataea, decided to confront the Persians directly. The Battle of Marathon became one of the most celebrated confrontations in ancient history. Miltiades opted for a risky tactic, strengthening the flanks of his troops to envelop the Persians in a pincer movement. When the Persian forces advanced, the Athenian hoplites, advancing in tight formation, managed to crush the Persian flanks, forcing the enemy army to retreat towards the sea. It is estimated that about 6,400 Persian soldiers were killed in the battle, while Greek casualties were minimal in comparison, with about 192 men killed. The defeat at Marathon was a significant blow to Darius's pride. Not only did he fail to subdue Athens, but he also suffered a humiliating military defeat against a much smaller army. The Greek victory at Marathon boosted the morale of the Greek city-states and fostered a sense of unity against the Persian threat. Although the Battle of Marathon was a major setback, Darius did not abandon his desire to subjugate Greece. He immediately began preparing a new military expedition, even larger than the previous one, with the intent to invade Greece decisively. However, before he could carry out his plans, Darius was forced to deal with a series of revolts in Egypt, which delayed his preparations. By 486 BC, as Darius was preparing to personally lead a campaign against the rebellious Egyptians, he began to suffer from health problems. Although the exact details of his illness are unclear in historical records, it is widely accepted that he died of natural causes, likely related to age and physical wear. Darius had been in power for nearly 4 decades and was over 60 years old when he died, an advanced age for the time. Darius's death occurred at the end of 486 BC, either in his capital at Persepolis or in the city of Susa, where he spent much of his time managing the empire. His death marked the end of an era of great expansion and consolidation for the Persian Empire. However, his passing left several issues unresolved, especially the planned military campaigns against Egypt and Greece, which would be inherited by his son and successor, Xerxes I. Xerxes I ascended to the throne of the Achaemenid Persian Empire in 486 BC, following the death of his father, Darius the Great. He inherited a vast and powerful empire that stretched from the Indus Valley to Egypt and Asia Minor, as well as an unfinished mission, the conquest of Greece. The desire to subdue the Greek city-states was a matter of honor for Xerxes, who sought to avenge the humiliating defeat his father suffered at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. Thus, in 480 BC, he launched one of the largest military campaigns of the ancient world, known as the Second Persian Invasion of Greece. Xerxes spent years preparing his army and building a naval fleet that could sustain the campaign. He assembled one of the largest armies ever seen in the ancient world, with reports estimating the number of soldiers to range from 100,000 to 300,000, though some sources, like the Greek historian Herodotus, mention inflated numbers as high as 1 million men. This army included troops from various nations of the vast Persian Empire, including Medes, Babylonians, Egyptians, Arabs, Scythians, and Indians, reflecting the great diversity of the Achaemenid Empire. To facilitate the movement of his forces, Xerxes oversaw the construction of a floating bridge across the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles in Turkey, allowing his army to cross from Asia Minor into Europe. This impressive engineering feat symbolized Persian power and Xerxes' determination to subjugate Greece. Additionally, Xerxes ordered the excavation of a canal through Mount Athos in Thrace to avoid the risk of storms that had decimated the Persian fleet during Darius's first invasion. In 480 BC, Xerxes led his massive army across the Hellespont and marched through Thrace and Macedonia, subjugating these regions. His naval fleet, composed of hundreds of triremes and transport ships, followed along the coast, ensuring the supply of his troops. As he advanced toward central Greece, Xerxes encountered resistance from the Greek city-states, particularly Athens and Sparta, which had united against the invader. The Greeks, although politically divided, recognized the threat posed by Xerxes and decided to resist. An alliance led by the Spartans and Athenians was formed to stop the Persian advance. Knowing they could not face the gigantic Persian army in open field, the Greeks decided to block the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a narrow pass between the sea and the mountains, which offered a defensive advantage. The defense of Thermopylae was led by Leonidas, the king of Sparta, who commanded a small contingent of about 7,000 soldiers, including his famous 300 Spartans. The Spartans were known for their rigorous military training and combat skills, making them a feared force in the Greek world. Along with the Spartans, there were soldiers from other Greek city-states, such as Thespiae and Plataea. Leonidas's plan was simple: use the narrow terrain of Thermopylae to limit the numerical advantage of the Persians. The pass was so narrow that it prevented the Persian army from using its superior numbers in open battle, forcing them to attack in controlled waves, which could be repelled by the Greeks. Confident in the strength of his army, Xerxes ordered a series of direct attacks. But to his surprise, the Persian forces suffered heavy losses, unable to break through the Greek defensive line. The Immortals, the elite Persian guard, were sent to break Spartan resistance, but they too failed. The Greeks, with their tightly packed phalanx formation, managed to hold their position against repeated Persian assaults for 2 full days. The bravery and discipline of the Spartans in battle became legendary, and the Greeks inflicted heavy casualties on Xerxes' forces. However, the Greeks' fortunes changed on the 3rd day of battle. A Greek trader named Ephialtes, who knew the region well, revealed to Xerxes the existence of a mountain path that bypassed the Thermopylae Pass, allowing the Persians to outflank the defenders. Xerxes immediately sent a part of his troops, led by the Immortals, along this path to encircle the Greeks. Upon learning that the Persians were about to surround them, Leonidas made a crucial decision. He allowed most of the Greek troops to retreat to fight another day, while he and his 300 Spartans, along with about 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans, decided to stay and fight to the death to delay the Persian advance. Knowing they were surrounded, the Spartans and their allies fought valiantly but were ultimately massacred by the Persian forces. Leonidas was killed in battle, and his body was captured and mutilated by Xerxes' orders, as an attempt to demoralize the Greeks. Despite the final defeat, the resistance at Thermopylae gave the Greeks time to prepare for the next phase of the invasion. The heroic Spartan stand inspired the Greek city-states to continue the fight against the Persians. After the victory at Thermopylae in 480 BC, Xerxes advanced toward Athens. The conquest of Athens was one of Xerxes' primary objectives during his military campaign in Greece, both because of the city's strategic position and the need to avenge the Persian defeat at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, where the forces of his father, Darius the Fur, had been defeated by the Athenians. As the Persian army advanced, the Athenian leaders, under the guidance of Themistocles, decided to evacuate the city. Knowing that the Persian numerical superiority made defending Athens virtually impossible, the Athenians transferred most of the population to the island of Salamis, where they believed they could mount a more effective defense. The women, children, and elderly were sent to Troezen, a city in the Peloponnese and other safe areas. Temples and public buildings were emptied, and the city was left almost deserted. Themistocles, convinced that the decisive battle would be fought at sea, ordered the Athenian fleet to concentrate in the waters near Salamis, preparing for a decisive naval battle against the Persians. When Xerxes arrived in Athens, he found the city nearly deserted. However, the Acropolis, the sacred hill at the center of the city, was still defended by a small group of Athenians who refused to abandon the city and attempted to resist, trusting in the protection of the sacred walls of the Acropolis. Xerxes, irritated by this resistance, ordered a direct attack. The Persians climbed the sacred hill, and after a brief struggle, they captured the Acropolis. Athens fell quickly into Persian hands. Xerxes, wanting to send a clear message of power and vengeance, ordered the city to be plundered and set on fire. The temples on the Acropolis, including the Temple of Athena and other sacred structures, were destroyed. Athens, the cultural and spiritual heart of Greece, was left in ruins. The burning of Athens by the Persians was seen as an act of retaliation for the help the Athenians had given to the Ionians during the Ionian Revolt, as well as for the humiliation the Persians had suffered at Marathon. Despite the destruction of their city, the Athenians, led by Themistocles, were far from defeated. They had concentrated on the island of Salamis, where the Greek fleet was gathered. Themistocles knew that control of the sea would be decisive, as the Persian land forces were immense and difficult to face in a conventional battle. However, the Greek navy, composed mostly of fast and well-crewed triremes, stood a chance of victory over the Persian fleet in a naval confrontation. Themistocles used his cunning to lure the Persian fleet into the narrow waters between Salamis and the mainland. He sent a false message to Xerxes, suggesting that the Greeks were in disarray and about to flee, which led Xerxes to order an immediate attack. The plan worked perfectly. The Persian fleet, large but less maneuverable, was drawn into the narrow straits of Salamis, where the Greek triremes could maneuver more easily. The Persian Empire controlled about 600 warships, including Phoenician, Egyptian, and Cyprian triremes. The Greek fleet, led by Athens, had about 370 triremes. On the morning of September 29, 480 BC, the Persian fleet, under the command of Admiral Aristobulus, Xerxes' brother, entered the Straits of Salamis. Xerxes, confident in the numerical superiority of his navy, positioned himself on a throne set atop a hill at Agelaos, on the mainland, to watch what he believed would be a certain victory. He had a clear view of the battle unfolding in the waters below. The battle began with the Greeks launching a sudden attack. Their triremes, fast and agile, took advantage of the narrow waters to maneuver precisely. The heavy Persian triremes, designed for battles in open waters, struggled to maneuver in the straits, where space was limited. The Greeks' tactic of ambushing and attacking the Persian ships from the flanks quickly proved effective. As the Greek triremes rammed into the Persian ships with their reinforced prows, confusion spread among the Persian fleet. Many of the Persian ships collided with each other, and the crews, coming from different regions of the empire, had difficulty coordinating. Admiral Aristobulus was killed early in the battle, further weakening the Persian leadership in the fight. The Greeks capitalized on the disorganization of the Persian fleet. Athenians, Aeginetans, and Corinthians played key roles in destroying the enemy ships. The Greek triremes, being smaller and lighter, were able to cut off the Persian ships' escape routes, trapping them in the straits and destroying their vessels en masse. Out of the 600 Persian ships that participated in the battle, it is believed that about 200 to 300 were destroyed or captured by the Greeks. In contrast, the Greeks lost only about 40 triremes. The Persian defeat was devastating, both in terms of the number of ships and morale. Xerxes, who witnessed the massacre of his fleet, saw his plans for conquest fall apart before his eyes. The defeat at Salamis was a fatal blow to Xerxes' expansionist ambitions. Although the Persian land army remained immense and powerful, the destruction of the fleet meant that the Persians could no longer control the Aegean Sea or guarantee the supply of their troops by sea. The logistics of sustaining such a large army in foreign territory became unsustainable without naval support. After the defeat, Xerxes became fearful of possible revolts in other parts of the empire, as Persian military weakness had been exposed. He decided to return to Persia, leaving his general Mardonius in charge of continuing the war in Greece with the remaining land forces. Mardonius attempted to reorganize the troops and maintain the Persian presence, but the naval defeat greatly reduced the chances of success. In the following year, 479 BC, the Greeks, emboldened by the victory at Salamis, organized a land offensive against the Persians in the Battle of Plataea. Led by the Spartans under the command of Pausanias, the Greeks defeated Mardonius's troops, ending the Persian invasion. The victory at Plataea, along with the Persian defeat at Salamis, marked the definitive end of Persian ambitions to expand westward and subjugate Greece. The Battle of Salamis was a turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars and the beginning of the end of Persian expansion in Greece. The cunning of Themistocles and the bravery of the Greek sailors led to the defeat of one of the largest naval forces in ancient history. This setback, along with the Greek victory at Plataea, ensured that Greece remained free from Persian domination, preserving its culture, politics, and independence, while the Persian Empire retreated from its attempt at Western expansion. Returning to his capitals in Susa and Persepolis, Xerxes found himself in a vastly different situation from that of his father, Darius the Great, who had ruled the empire at the height of its expansion. The defeats in the Greek campaigns weakened Xerxes' image and the perception of his invincibility among his subjects. The cost of the wars, both in terms of financial resources and prestige, was immense, leading to internal tensions and a series of revolts in the provinces, especially in Egypt and Babylon. Although Xerxes managed to suppress these uprisings, his authority was weakened, and his reign increasingly became marked by palace intrigues and rivalries within the Persian court. During the last years of his reign, Xerxes withdrew more and more into a life of luxury and excess in the palaces of Susa and Persepolis. He distanced himself from the direct administration of the empire, delegating many of his responsibilities to his advisors and courtiers. Among these advisors was Artabanus, the head of the royal guard, who became a central figure in the conspiracy that would lead to Xerxes' assassination. Artabanus was one of the most powerful figures at the Persian court, and his years as commander of the royal guard had given him influence and knowledge of the empire's political intricacies. Although initially loyal to Xerxes, Artabanus began to harbor ambitions of controlling the throne. He forged alliances with other influential figures at court, including Achaemenid, a eunuch who also held great influence over the king and who would play a crucial role in the conspiracy. In 465 BC, after years of planning, Artabanus decided that the time was ripe to overthrow Xerxes. The reasons for the coup are not entirely clear in the historical records, but they seem to include dissatisfaction with Xerxes, weakened leadership, and Artabanus' ambition to take control of the empire. The coup was carefully planned and involved the assassination of the king himself. According to the account of Cambyses, a Greek historian and physician who served at the Persian court, Xerxes' assassination was executed swiftly and precisely. The plot involved the collaboration of Achaemenid and other members of the king's inner circle. Xerxes was killed in his private chambers at the palace in Susa during the night while he slept. Artabanus, leading the conspirators, entered the royal chambers and stabbed the king to death. Xerxes' death was initially kept secret while Artabanus attempted to consolidate his position in the empire. His plan was to place one of Xerxes' sons, Artaxerxes I, on the throne, but under his direct control. To achieve this, he manipulated the young prince Artaxerxes, convincing him that the legitimate heir, Darius, Artaxerxes' brother, had been responsible for Xerxes' death. Believing Artabanus' lie, Artaxerxes ordered Darius' execution, thus eliminating a potential rival for the throne. After the death of Xerxes, the Persian Empire lost even more ground in Greece and the Aegean Sea. The Delian League, a naval alliance led by Athens, continued to pressure the Persian Empire, driving it out of the Greek cities in Asia Minor. Although hostilities between Persia and the Greek city-states diminished temporarily, Persian influence in the Western Mediterranean was significantly weakened. One of the pivotal moments in Persian-Greek relations came in 449 BC, during the reign of Artaxerxes I, with the signing of the Peace of Calais. This treaty, between Athens and the Persian Empire, marked the end of direct hostilities between the two powers. The treaty formalized the recognition of the autonomy of the Greek city-states and effectively put an end to Persia's ambitions to expand its control over the Aegean and Greece. While the empire remained a major power in the east, its influence in the Mediterranean had diminished considerably. Artaxerxes I ruled until 424 BC, and his death ushered in a new era of dynastic instability. After his death, the empire was plunged into disputes over the throne. Xerxes II, the legitimate son of Artaxerxes Darius, was crowned king, but his reign was extremely short. He ruled for only 45 days before being assassinated by his half-brother, Sogdianus, who also claimed the throne. Sogdianus, in turn, ruled for less than a year before being deposed and executed by another half-brother, Darius II. The reign of Darius II was marked by growing instability and corruption. Although Darius II managed to maintain control over the empire, he was a weak ruler, largely dominated by his wife, Persian, who exercised great influence at court. During Darius II's reign, the situation in Egypt deteriorated further, and the empire was unable to fully reconquer the region. When Artaxerxes II, son of Darius II, ascended the throne in 404 BC, Persia was facing an internal crisis. Cyrus the younger brother of Artaxerxes II, attempted to usurp the throne with the support of Greek mercenaries. This attempt culminated in the Battle of Cambyses, 401 BC, in Mesopotamia, where Cyrus was killed in combat, ending his rebellion. The Greek mercenaries, led by Xenophon, managed to escape and return to Greece, an event narrated by Xenophon in the famous work Anabasis. During the reign of Artaxerxes II, Persia continued its policy of interference in Greek affairs, funding the Peloponnesian War, 431–404 BC, a conflict between Athens and Sparta. Persia alternately supported both sides, seeking to weaken the Greek city-states and maintain control over the coastal regions of Asia Minor. After Sparta's victory, the empire managed to restore its control over the Ionian cities and other parts of eastern Greece. Despite these diplomatic victories, Artaxerxes II's reign was marred by a series of provincial revolts. Egypt rebelled again, this time under the command of Amirtius, and managed to free itself from Persian control in 404 BC. The loss of one of the empire's richest provinces was a heavy blow to Persian power. When Artaxerxes III ascended the throne in 358 BC, he was a more energetic ruler than his predecessors. He undertook a series of military campaigns to restore Persian authority over the rebellious provinces. His greatest achievement was the reconquest of Egypt in 343 BC, after more than 60 years of independence. Egypt was reincorporated into the empire with brutality, and Artaxerxes III ensured its loyalty by force. However, the reconquest of Egypt was one of the last great successes of the Persian Empire. Internally, the empire was increasingly weakened by corruption, and revolts continued in the provinces. Artaxerxes III was assassinated in 338 BC by his minister Bagoas, an influential eunuch who controlled much of the political affairs at the Persian court. After the assassination of Artaxerxes III in 338 BC, the Persian Empire experienced a period of instability, with a succession of brief and ineffective rulers. It was not until 336 BC that Darius III was crowned king. Darius III inherited an empire that was already weakened, both by internal problems and by the growing external threat posed by Macedonia, under the leadership of Alexander the Great. In 334 BC, Alexander launched his campaign against the Persian Empire, crossing the Hellespont, the modern-day Dardanelles, with an army of approximately 35,000 men, consisting of Macedonian, Greek, and allied troops. Alexander brought with him a well-trained army that included heavy infantry, known as the Macedonian phalanx, as well as an elite cavalry led by his friend and general Hephaestion. The first major battle between Alexander and the Persians took place at the Battle of Granicus, along the Granicus River in northwestern Asia Minor, modern Turkey. The Persian army, made up primarily of Greek mercenaries, tried to block Alexander's crossing. The battle was fierce, but Alexander's tactics, including a decisive charge by his heavy cavalry, resulted in a crushing victory. With this victory, Alexander consolidated his control over Asia Minor and began to capture several cities, including Ephesus, Miletus, and Halicarnassus, which resisted but were defeated one by one. After the initial victories in Asia Minor, Alexander advanced south toward Syria, where he encountered Darius III for the first time in a decisive battle. The Battle of Issus in 333 BC took place near the city of Issus, along the southern coast of modern-day Turkey. Darius had gathered a considerably larger army, with estimates ranging from 50,000 to 100,000 men, including a vast infantry, cavalry, and even war chariots. Despite Darius's numerical superiority, the mountainous terrain favored Alexander, who was able to flank the Persian army and break through their defensive lines with his cavalry. During the battle, Darius fled the battlefield, abandoning his family, including his mother, wife, and children, who were captured by Alexander. Darius III tried to negotiate his surrender and offered part of his empire in exchange for peace, but Alexander refused, insisting that he should rule the entire Persian Empire. After the victory at Issus, Alexander marched south toward Egypt, which had been a rebellious province of the Persian Empire. Egypt had been under Persian control since its reconquest by Artaxerxes III in 343 BC. But the Egyptians were discontented with Persian rule and welcomed Alexander as a liberator. With little resistance, Alexander entered Egypt and was crowned pharaoh in Memphis. In Egypt, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria in 331 BC, which would become one of the greatest cultural and intellectual centers of the ancient world. During his time in Egypt, Alexander also visited the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis, where he was proclaimed the son of Zeus Amun, further strengthening his leadership and divine legitimacy. After consolidating his control over Egypt, Alexander marched eastward toward the heart of the Persian Empire. The decisive battle between Alexander and Darius III took place at Gaugamela, on the plains of Mesopotamia near modern-day Mosul, Iraq. The Battle of Gaugamela, fought on October 1st, 331 BC, is considered one of the greatest battles of antiquity. Darius gathered an immense army, estimated between 200,000 and 300,000 soldiers, including cavalry, heavy infantry, war chariots with blades, and war elephants. He chose Gaugamela for its flat terrain, ideal for his numerous troops. Despite the numerical disadvantage, Alexander used brilliant tactics to flank the Persian army and create an opening in the center. During the battle, Alexander personally led a direct charge against Darius. As in the Battle of Issus, Darius fled the battlefield when he saw his troops being overwhelmed, leaving his army demoralized. The victory at Gaugamela secured Alexander control over the capitals of the Persian Empire, including Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, and Ecbatana. Alexander entered Babylon triumphantly, where he was welcomed as both a conqueror and a legitimate ruler. In Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire, Alexander ordered the city to be sacked and its palace burned, supposedly as revenge for the destruction of Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars. This act symbolized the end of the Persian Empire as a dominant force in the world. After the defeat at Gaugamela, Darius III fled eastward, seeking to reorganize his forces and gather support in the empire's eastern provinces. However, he was betrayed by his own satraps, with Bessus, the governor of Bactria, being the main conspirator. Bessus captured Darius and held him prisoner, hoping to use his capture as leverage to establish himself as the new king of Persia. In 330 BC, while pursuing Darius, Alexander found the Persian king already dead, having been assassinated by Bessus. Alexander, who had declared his intention to capture Darius alive and treat him with dignity, was enraged by the murder. He ordered that Darius be buried with royal honors, according to Persian customs, and began hunting down Bessus. Shortly after, Bessus was captured and executed for treason, thus ending the last vestiges of organized Persian resistance. With the death of Darius III, the Achaemenid Empire officially came to an end. Alexander took the title of King of Asia and sought to integrate Greek and Persian cultures. He married Roxana, a Bactrian princess, and promoted the fusion of Greek and Persian elites. He maintained much of the Persian administrative structure, including the use of satraps to govern the provinces, and adopted many Persian customs, which caused dissatisfaction among his Macedonian generals. Alexander's campaign to conquer the Persian Empire was one of the most remarkable military feats in history. In just 4 years, he subjugated an empire that had existed for more than 2 centuries. Alexander's conquest marked the beginning of the Hellenization of the Middle East, where Greek culture spread throughout the former Persian Empire, blending with local traditions and creating a new Hellenistic world. After Alexander the Great's death in 323 BC, his vast empire was divided among his generals, the so-called Diadochi, who fought for control of the different parts of his empire. The region of Persia and adjacent areas came under the rule of Seleucus I Nicator, one of Alexander's most loyal commanders, who founded the Seleucid dynasty. In 312 BC, Seleucus established the Seleucid Empire, which controlled a vast territory stretching from Asia Minor to India, with its capital in Seleucia, on the banks of the Tigris River. The Seleucid Empire was one of the largest Hellenistic states that emerged after Alexander's death, and its rulers tried to maintain the cultural fusion between Greek and Persian elements that Alexander had promoted. Cities like Seleucia, Antioch, and others became centers of Hellenistic culture, where the Greek language was widely used in arts, science, and administration. However, the vast Seleucid territory was difficult to control, and the rulers faced constant rebellions in the eastern provinces. Persia, in particular, maintained its cultural identity, and Seleucid rule was often viewed as foreign occupation. Over time, the influence of the Seleucid Empire began to wane, especially due to the rise of regional powers like the Parthian Empire. The Parthian Empire emerged as a dominant force in 247 BC, founded by Arsaces Thormar, the leader of a nomadic tribe from the region of Parthava, located in northeastern Iran, modern-day Turkmenistan. The Parthians, also known as the Arsacid dynasty, quickly rebelled against Seleucid control, taking advantage of the empire's weakening grip. They conquered Parthia and, under Arsaces I and his successors, rapidly expanded westward, establishing a dynasty that would last almost 500 years. The capital of the Parthian Empire was initially located in Hekatompilos and later moved to Ctesiphon, near modern Baghdad. The power of the Parthians grew largely due to their strategic location along the Silk Road, which connected the east and west, allowing them to control trade between Rome and China. The Parthians were also known for their heavy cavalry, the famous cataphracts, who played a significant role in their battles against Rome. The rise of the Parthian Empire inevitably led to conflicts with the Roman Empire, which, by the 1st century BC, began expanding its influence in the Middle East. The Roman-Parthian Wars were a series of conflicts that lasted for more than 3 centuries, involving epic battles for control over strategic territories such as Mesopotamia and Armenia. The first major confrontation occurred in 53 BC at the Battle of Kerhai, modern Haran, Turkey, where the Roman general Crassus was defeated by Parthian forces under the command of Serena. The Parthian cavalry, composed of mounted archers and cataphracts, crushed the Roman legions, resulting in Crassus' death and the capture of his troops. This was one of the most humiliating defeats in Roman military history. The wars between Rome and the Parthian Empire continued intermittently, with territories frequently changing hands. In 161 AD, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius launched a campaign against the Parthians, reconquering some areas of Mesopotamia, but the hostilities persisted. Although the Parthians remained a powerful force, they were never able to decisively defeat Roman dominance in the east, and the two empires maintained a tense and competitive relationship. In 224 AD, the Parthian Empire came to an end when Ardashir the Friparas, the governor of Pars, Persis, led a rebellion and defeated the last Parthian king, Artabanus IV, at the Battle of Hormozgan. Ardashir founded the Sassanid dynasty, marking the beginning of a new era in Persian history. The Sassanid Empire re-emerged as a centralized Persian power, with a strong cultural and religious identity. Under the Sassanids, the capital was established in Ctesiphon, which became one of the largest cities in the empire. Shapur I.e., the son of Ardashir, expanded the empire to include much of the former Achaemenid territory, defeating the Roman Empire on several occasions. He famously captured the Roman Emperor Valerian in 260 AD, an unprecedented event in Roman history. The wars between the Sassanid Empire and the Roman Empire continued for centuries. These conflicts often revolved around the control of Mesopotamia and Armenia, with both empires vying for strategic dominance over these regions. By the end of the 3rd century, the Sassanid king Narseh fought a series of battles against the Roman Emperor Diocletian. Later, in the 4th century, under the rule of Shapur II, the Sassanids launched several successful campaigns against Rome, recapturing lost territories. These conflicts were so prolonged that when the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire, emerged. It continued the struggle against the Sassanids. The true end of the Persian Empire occurred in 651 AD, with the fall of the Sassanid dynasty due to the Islamic Arab invasion. The last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, was defeated by the forces of the Rashidun Caliphate after a series of battles, including the decisive Battle of Nahavand in 642 AD. With Yazdegerd's death in 651 AD, the Sassanid Empire collapsed, and Persian territory was gradually Islamized, marking the end of the last great Persian Empire of antiquity and the beginning of a new chapter in the region's history under Islamic rule. Thus, the Persian Empire, which began with Cyrus the Great, evolved into one of the most powerful and influential civilizations in ancient history, with a legacy that endures to this day. From its origins among the Aryan tribes to the rise of the Achaemenid kings, the Persians demonstrated skill in administration, military expansion, and cultural tolerance. Cyrus' policy, which respected the traditions and religions of conquered peoples, was a key factor that contributed to the cohesion of his vast empire, which stretched from Egypt to India. The predominant religion in Persia was Zoroastrianism, one of the world's first monotheistic religions. Its principles of cosmic dualism and justice influenced not only Persian culture, but also other religions, such as Judaism and Christianity. During the Sassanid reign, Zoroastrianism was revitalized and became even more central to Persian identity. The Persian army was one of the most formidable forces of the time, composed of a diverse array of peoples and ethnicities, including Medes, Elamites, Babylonians, and even Greek mercenaries. The elite troops, known as the Immortals, were the personal guard of the kings and played a crucial role in Persian military campaigns. One of the most curious moments in Persian history was Alexander the Great's supposed visit to the tomb of Cyrus the Great in Pasargadae. Upon conquering the empire in 330 BC, Alexander is said to have visited the tomb to pay tribute to Cyrus's greatness. He reportedly ordered repairs to the site and showed deep respect for the founder of the empire he had just subdued. The fall of the Persian Empire was marked by a series of critical events, including defeats in the Greco-Persian Wars, Alexander's invasions, and finally the Arab invasion, which led to the collapse of the Sassanid dynasty. Despite its fall, the cultural, military, and administrative legacy of the Persian Empire influenced future civilizations, from the Hellenistic period to the Islamic era. The revival of Persian culture under the Sassanids, particularly in the areas of art, science, and philosophy, made a lasting contribution that shaped the history of the Middle East and beyond. In terms of cuisine, the Persians already demonstrated great sophistication and diversity of ingredients. Bread, made mainly from wheat or barley, was one of the main foods consumed by the population. In addition, rice, although not yet as popular as it would be in the Islamic period, was already beginning to be part of the diet in some regions. Meals often included a variety of vegetables, meats, especially lamb, and dried fruits such as dates and nuts. Persian cuisine valued the balance between sour and sweet flavors, using ingredients such as pomegranates, saffron, and aromatic spices, which made the dishes true sensory experiences. The Persians also had a strong military tradition, and their weapons were developed for effectiveness and diversity in combat scenarios. Among the most famous were the composite bows, which allowed accurate shots at great distances, and the spears, which were widely used by infantry and cavalry. The elite of the Persian army, the Immortals, were equipped with short swords called Achaemenid and light shields that facilitated their mobility in combat. In addition, they used armor made of reinforced leather or metal to protect themselves in battle, always maintaining an imposing appearance. As for marriage, the ceremonies were important events, surrounded by rituals and religious meaning. Marriage was seen as a sacred contract, with a strong influence from Zoroastrianism, the predominant religion in the empire. Families played a crucial role in organizing marriages, with arranged marriages being common. Festivities could last for days, involving lavish banquets and valuable gifts. There was also the practice of a man being able to have several wives, especially among the nobility, although there was a formal respect for marital ties. However, Unlike other cultures, it is not known for sure whether the Persians had a consolidated tradition of tattoos. While some ancient cultures viewed tattoos as signs of status or spiritual protection, archaeological evidence for tattoos in the ancient Persian Empire is sparse. However, there are records of body decorations, such as paintings and jewelry, which may have been used for rituals or on special occasions. Education in ancient Persia was primarily geared toward the education of elite youth. Boys, in particular, were educated from an early age in subjects such as chivalry, archery, and Zoroastrian ethics. Physical education was a central part of the lives of young Persians, preparing them for the military and administrative challenges they would face later in life. In addition, the Persians placed great value on the concept of truth and justice, principles that were reflected in both daily life and the educational system. In linguistic terms, Old Persian, also called Achaemenid Persian, was the official language of the empire. However, due to the vast territorial extension, a multitude of languages and dialects coexisted, such as Aramaic, which was the lingua franca used for imperial administration. Cuneiform writing was used to inscribe royal decrees and important documents, while Aramaic was widely used for daily and governmental communications, and was one of the most widely spoken languages throughout the empire. Persian art and architecture reflected the splendor and cultural diversity of the empire. Cities such as Persepolis and Susa were adorned with grand palaces, carved in stone, and decorated with detailed reliefs showing scenes of tribute to the king and representations of conquered peoples. One of the great highlights of Persian architecture were the imposing columns, often adorned with figures of bulls and lions. In addition, Persian gardens, known as paradisos, were a symbol of harmony and order, a representation of earthly paradise. These gardens, with their symmetrically arranged ponds, fountains, and trees, reflected the Persians' relationship with nature and the importance of balance. Persian clothing was an indicator of social status, and both men and women of the elite enjoyed luxurious and sophisticated attire. Men wore long tunics and trousers made of fabric, often embroidered with intricate designs, and wore cylindrical hats. Noble women also wore ornate tunics, often made of silk and fine fabrics, and covered themselves with elegant veils or cloaks. Gold and precious jewelry adorned both men and women, demonstrating wealth and prestige. The Persians were renowned for their cavalry and the use of horses in their military campaigns. Persian horses, especially the Nisaean breed, were considered the finest in ancient times and were bred specifically for warfare. In addition to the cataphracts, heavily armed horsemen, the Persians also used horse archers, whose ability to accurately fire arrows while galloping was one of the hallmarks of the Persian army. Persian horsemen were trained from a young age, with horsemanship being a crucial part of the education of the nobility. The Persian Empire, with its grandeur and achievements, continues to stand as an example of a civilization that profoundly marked world history, both for its military prowess and its cultural contributions. And if you like the content, then don't forget to like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible videos like this. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing fascinating stories and curiosities of these ancient civilizations